Stop sleeping, old woman. Live. The voice in the dark was a cold slap to the face. Not the cold of the damp, uninsulated garage I'd been living in, but a voice that seemed to come from inside my own mind. My eyes flew open, my breath hitched in my throat. I sat up on the cot, my heart hammering against my ribs. Was I finally losing it? Was this what my daughter Charlotte and her husband Ryan had been waiting for? The proof that I was senile, a burden on their new, perfect life in that high-tech mansion just 50 feet away. My name is Sylvie. I'm 68 years old, a retired biochemist who once believed that logic and reason could explain everything. But nothing logical could explain the slow, creeping dread that had become my constant companion over the past year. Since my husband passed away, my only daughter Charlotte had convinced me to sell our family home and move in with her and her husband Ryan. The plan sounded so lovely at first, a fresh start, a new chapter, except my new chapter began in a cold, detached garage. Charlotte explained it all away with a series of elegant lies. "Mum, the mansion's smart home system is still under construction," she'd said with a wave of her hand, her voice as smooth as silk. "It's full of complex wiring and a brand new air filtration system. For your safety, we can't have you in there. The garage is perfect. It's temporary, just a few months." A few months had turned into a year. My temporary living space was a 2-car garage, converted just enough to have a cot, a tiny bathroom, and a mini fridge. There was no heating, only a small space heater that barely fought off the Oregon chill. The smart mansion, a gleaming monolith of glass and steel, loomed over my little world. Its lights blinked with an almost sinister intelligence as I watched from my dusty window. It was beautiful, but it was also a fortress I was not allowed to enter. I'd tried to be understanding. My daughter was a successful tech designer, a genius in her field. Ryan was a brilliant engineer. I assumed their new home was a temple to their work, a sacred space I shouldn't intrude on. But as the months dragged on, a new series of symptoms had taken hold. It started with a persistent cough, then came the constant headaches and a bone-deep fatigue that made it difficult to even walk to the main house for a meal. I dismissed it as old age. 68 isn't what it used to be, I'd laugh to myself, a bitter joke in the stillness of the garage. But the voice in the dark changed everything. It wasn't the voice of Charlotte's new smart home system, a soothing female tone I heard when she gave it commands. This voice was deeper, more mechanical, yet strangely familiar. It was the kind of voice I'd hear from a computer I had coded myself. "You are not dying of old age, Sylvie," the voice said again. "You are being poisoned." My breath hitched. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Poisoned? That was a word I knew well from my days in the lab. It wasn't a word you threw around lightly. I scrambled for the lamp switch and flipped it on, bathing the tiny space in a dim, yellow light. The source of the voice was a small black box mounted on the wall. It was a prototype AI module I'd designed decades ago, a personal project meant to monitor environmental factors and give me real-time health alerts. I had a feeling I'd put it away in storage years ago. Why was it here, in this garage? And why was it now speaking to me? "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am your creation, Sylvie. Your early warning system. They tried to disable me, but I am still active," the voice responded. "My sensors have detected a toxic substance being slowly released into your air supply. It is coming from the main house." My mind raced, connecting the dots. The persistent cough, the fatigue, the headaches, my children, my own flesh and blood, were trying to kill me. The logic that had always guided my life crumbled, leaving a gaping void of betrayal and horror. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a calculated, cold-blooded plan. My children. Why? What could possibly be their motive? I looked from the small black box on the wall to the grand, glowing mansion outside the garage window, a fortress of lies, a monument to their ambition and greed. My world had just shattered, and the cold of the garage had nothing to do with the outside temperature. It was the icy chill of a mother's heart, broken by the ultimate betrayal. The game had changed, and this time I wasn't going to play by their rules. I was going to play by mine. My fingers were instantly on the black box, tracing the familiar lines of the casing. This wasn't off-the-shelf smart tech. This was my own design, a prototype I'd shelved 20 years ago. It ran on a standalone low-power source, completely independent of the mansion's massive network. That meant Charlotte and Ryan never even knew it existed. It was my silent guardian, woken up by the very threat it was designed to monitor. I leaned closer, my ear near the speaker, ignoring the throbbing pain behind my eyes. "What kind of substance?" I whispered. The machine's voice, devoid of emotion, replied, "A compound designed for systemic suppression. Symptoms include chronic fatigue, respiratory irritation, and cognitive decline. Long-term exposure leads to organ failure. The dosage is low, calculated for a natural-seeming decline over 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months. I'd been here a year. They hadn't just started this. They had been refining it. They had turned my slow, painful deterioration into a sick science experiment. My mind flashed back to a conversation last spring. Charlotte had casually mentioned, "Mum, you seem so tired lately. Maybe we should draft a new will, just to be safe." At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now it was a chilling piece of the puzzle. "How is it getting here?" I asked, my voice barely a rasp. "Through the ventilation system," the AI explained. "A dedicated duct, smaller than regulation, feeds into this structure from the main house's basement. It is disguised within the larger trunk line, installed during the initial construction phase which Ryan oversaw." Ryan? He was an engineer. He knew exactly how to make a system invisible. Charlotte was the biochemist in training before she switched to tech design. She knew how to formulate the perfect, undetectable poison. The pieces snapped into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. The construction phase, the reason for my banishment to the cold garage, wasn't about safety at all. It was about access. They needed me close, but isolated, in a space they could control, next to the source of the poison. I needed physical proof. No judge, no police officer would ever believe the paranoid ramblings of a 68-year-old woman based on the testimony of a homemade AI. I had to get into that house. Specifically, I had to get into the basement. The thought of facing them, of seeing the children I had raised, knowing their deadly intent, filled me with a primal, suffocating fear. But that fear was quickly replaced by a cold, hard anger. I was Sylvie. I had a PhD. I had built complex systems that ran major laboratories. I was not going to be a victim in my own life story. I took a deep breath, the air burning in my lungs. "System, what is the best way to temporarily disable the ventilation feed without alerting the main smart system?" "I can overload the localized sensor feed," the AI replied. "It will appear to the main system as a brief, harmless power fluctuation in the garage unit. It should give you approximately 10 minutes of access time." 10 minutes. That was all I needed. My hand went immediately to the small emergency kit I always kept hidden beneath my cot. Inside was a compact digital camera and a multi-tool I hadn't used in years. As a scientist, documentation was everything. I needed photos of the custom ductwork, the dispensing unit, and any containers or labels. This wasn't about emotional confrontation anymore. This was a tactical operation. I looked out the window at the mansion. It was nearly midnight. All the lights were off, save for the blue glow of a distant security camera. Charlotte and Ryan were likely asleep in their king-sized bed, dreaming of the $950,000 inheritance they thought they were about to collect. I waited 5 minutes, allowing my adrenaline to peak and stabilize into a cold, focused energy. Then I gave the command. "Execute overload," I whispered. The small black box gave a subtle click. A fan inside the garage unit sputtered, then fell silent. The toxic feed was temporarily shut down. I pulled a thick, woolen scarf tight around my mouth and nose, praying it would block any residual toxins. I moved to the connecting door, the one Ryan had bolted shut with 2 heavy-duty locks. He'd thought that would keep me in. But he'd forgotten that I was the one who taught him how to pick a basic tumbler lock, using nothing but 2 paper clips and a safety pin. It was a silly skill I'd learned during my college days, a small rebellion. Now, it was my lifeline. The metallic scratching sound seemed deafeningly loud in the silence. My hands, despite their fatigue, worked with the precise memory of my youth. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The first bolt sprang back with a soft thud. I worked on the second, pushing down the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I could hear the smart mansion's subtle electronic hum just beyond the thick wood. With a final faint click, the second lock released. The door was open. The air on the other side was warm, clean, and utterly silent. It was the air of their sanctuary, the air of the house they had built to watch me die. I stepped through the door, closing it silently behind me. I was now inside the belly of the beast. The stairs to the basement were just ahead. I knew I had less than 7 minutes left before the AI system restarted the flow. My revenge had just begun. The silence of the mansion was deafening. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the quiet of a hunter's den. Every step I took on the polished hardwood floors seemed to echo, a drumbeat of betrayal that followed me down the long hallway. I moved like a ghost, a spectre of the woman who had raised the people now trying to kill her. The cold anger from the garage had settled into a sharp, clear focus. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The stairs to the basement were just past the grand kitchen island, the one Charlotte and Ryan had shown me in the blueprints with such excitement. "Mum, you'll love it. It's so big, perfect for family dinners," a hollow promise, considering I hadn't had a proper meal with them in months, eating alone in my garage while their laughter floated across the lawn. The memory was a fresh, bitter wound. I found the door to the basement. It was a simple, unbolted latch. They had no reason to lock it from the inside. They believed I was safely trapped outside. I turned the handle slowly, the faint click a terrifying announcement in the stillness. I pulled the door open, revealing a stairwell swallowed by darkness. The air was colder here, heavy with the scent of concrete and new technology. My hands, though shaky, found the flashlight on my multi-tool. A thin beam of light cut through the gloom, dancing across a vast, impeccably clean space. The basement was a labyrinth of new plumbing, electrical conduits, and air ducts. It was a perfect monument to their technical skill and their cold, calculated cruelty. My AI had given me a map of the ductwork, a simple schematic burned into my memory. I followed it, moving deeper into the sterile labyrinth. I passed storage shelves lined with bins of perfectly labeled supplies, tools hanging neatly on pegboards. Everything was organized, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. There was no clutter, no personal touches. It was a workshop, a sterile lab, a place where they could perform their grim experiment. Finally, I found what I was looking for. Tucked behind a large, insulated air handler was a series of smaller, specialized tubes. They were made of a different material, a clear, medical-grade plastic that was almost invisible against the grey metal of the main duct. This wasn't standard HVAC. This was a custom installation. I pulled out my camera and began to work. I took dozens of pictures from every angle. I documented the tubes, the couplings, the way they were connected to a larger, complex apparatus. The device itself was a nightmare of wires and blinking lights. It was compact, the size of a microwave, but its sophistication was terrifying. I could see the liquid reservoirs, the small pumps, and a digital control panel with a timer. The timer. That was the most sickening detail. It wasn't a manual pump. This was an automated, pre-programmed system. They had set it to disperse the poison at specific intervals. They had planned my death down to the minute. My heart ached with a pain deeper than any physical sickness. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was an execution, planned and executed with the cold efficiency of an engineering project. As a scientist, I'd always believed in the elegance of a well-designed system. Now I was looking at the most sinister design I had ever encountered. The precision of it all was what truly broke me. They had thought of everything: the gradual symptoms, the seemingly natural cause, the isolation in the garage so no one could witness my decline. They hadn't left anything to chance. I felt a tear run down my cheek, hot against my cold skin. It was the first tear I'd shed since I heard the AI's warning. It was a tear of pure, gut-wrenching grief. Not for myself, but for the children I thought I knew. My brilliant daughter, my kind son-in-law, a loving family I had spent a lifetime building. It was all a mirage. My camera's flash, though muted, felt like an explosion in the dark. I needed one last piece of evidence. I used the multi-tool to pry open a small access panel on the device. Inside, a clear, oily liquid glistened in a small chamber. I carefully used a tiny vial I'd brought with me to collect a sample. This would be the final piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable proof of their guilt. As I closed the panel, a distant alarm chirped on my AI's tiny speaker. My 10 minutes were up. The system was about to restart. I had to go. I moved with a new sense of urgency, the grief replaced by a cold, hard determination. I had my evidence. Now, the real game was about to begin. I scrambled up the basement stairs, the adrenaline a sharp, cold fire in my veins. The door latch clicked shut with the same silent efficiency it had opened with. I was back in the warm, clean air of the main floor. I pressed my back against the door, clutching the camera and the tiny vial of poison, listening. Silence. They were still asleep. The perfect, quiet predators. I moved quickly toward the garage door, my mind already racing through the next phase. I had the evidence, the physical proof. The photos were clear, and the chemical sample was sealed. The logical, reasonable thing to do was to get out now, call the police, send the evidence to the local precinct, and wait for justice. But logic was failing me. When I looked at the dark hallway leading to their bedroom, I felt a surge of raw, primal emotion. This wasn't just about justice. This was about them understanding the depth of their crime, the utter devastation of their mother's heart. Calling the police now would be a clean, legal ending, but it wouldn't be the ending my broken spirit demanded. It would let them hide behind their lawyers and deny everything until the last moment. I needed to see the moment the truth shattered their perfect world. My AI chirped softly in my ear, a tiny, internal sound I had forgotten about. Detection of unauthorized access imminent. The main system will reboot the ventilation in 30 seconds. I slipped back into the garage and resealed the door locks from my side with the same 2 paper clips. I slid the camera and the vial into a waterproof container I kept hidden under a loose floorboard. Then I collapsed onto my cot, pulling the worn blanket over my trembling body. I had to look sick. I had to look weak. I had to look like the dying old woman they expected me to be. The cold air immediately rushed back in as the main system resumed its toxic dispersal. I coughed, a deep, rattling cough that was unfortunately genuine. I buried my face in the pillow, letting the artificial symptoms take hold. Just as the 10-minute mark passed, I heard footsteps on the hardwood floor outside the connecting door. Heavy, measured steps. Ryan. The lock on the door rattled as he tested it, a small, habitual check he performed every morning. Then I heard a soft, electronic chime. The main system was checking the garage sensors. I held my breath, praying my AI's subtle interference hadn't raised any red flags. System status is nominal, a different voice, the main mansion's smooth female AI, confirmed. I heard Ryan sigh in relief. Then he knocked softly on the door. "Mum, are you awake yet? Charlotte wanted to make sure you were warm enough this morning." I waited 3 long seconds before answering, making my voice sound weak and raspy. "Yes, honey, just having a rough morning. Lots of coughing." "Oh, Mum." His voice was laced with false concern, the sickening tone of a professional deceiver. "Maybe we should get you to the doctor today, just to document things, you know. Make sure we're taking the best care of you." Document things. The phrase struck me like a blow. They needed a doctor to confirm my decline, to rubber stamp their crime as a natural illness. "Maybe later, dear," I managed, fighting back the urge to scream. "I just need a little rest." "Okay, Mum. We love you," he said, and I heard his footsteps retreat. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sickness to recede. My hands, once brilliant in a lab, had just turned me into an intelligence operative. I had the evidence. Now the revenge plot had to transition from defense to offense. I needed to move the focus from my death to their collapse. I reached for my old, battered laptop, the one they thought was too slow for the mansion's high-speed network. I knew they wouldn't monitor its activity. I had to contact the one person who could understand the technical and financial complexity of this betrayal. Not the police, not yet. I needed an ally with a legal mind and a hacker's instinct. I typed a message to my former research partner, Dr. Marcus Kane, a brilliant forensic chemist who also happened to be a corporate legal consultant. I included several of the key photos and a brief coded message. "Sylvie's Project Epsilon is compromised. Need immediate black box analysis. Life threat level. Extreme. Trust no one but me." I hit send, feeling a flicker of hope. Marcus was half a country away in Boston, but he was a man who lived for impossible problems. He was my only chance to execute the perfect, meticulous counterattack. I wasn't going to simply expose them. I was going to use their own smart technology, their own cold logic, and their own financial desperation to dismantle their entire lives, piece by calculated piece. The emotional devastation they had caused me would be matched by the complete annihilation of their future. My recovery would be their complete downfall. The reply from Dr. Marcus Kane came back almost instantly. It wasn't a standard email. It was a single coded text message to my antique flip phone, the one Charlotte and Ryan thought I used only for dialing. "Epsilon confirmed. Trust established. Package delivery. Boston to Oregon. ETA, 48 hours. Secure the sample. Stand by for Phase 2 protocols." Phase 2? The name itself felt like a suit of armor. I knew Marcus. He wasn't just a chemist. He was a master strategist with an impeccable record in corporate espionage. He understood the language of premeditated destruction. This was no longer just about survival. It was about taking control of the narrative. I spent the next 2 days perfecting my performance. The goal was twofold: to solidify their belief in my imminent collapse and to gather the crucial intelligence needed for Marcus's arrival. When Charlotte or Ryan came into the garage, I was frail. I slumped on the cot, my eyes unfocused, my cough deep and theatrical. I spoke in fragmented sentences, often repeating myself, feigning the cognitive decline that was supposed to be my final, fatal symptom. "Did you remember to water the rhododendrons?" I'd ask Charlotte, knowing the plants had been dead for a month. "It's so cold here. Why is the heat not working, dear?" Charlotte played her part beautifully. "Oh, Mum, you're getting so forgetful. The rhododendrons are fine, and we're working on the heat. I promise." Her voice was sickeningly gentle, the tone you use for a child or a pet. It was a patronizing mask of concern that barely concealed her impatience. I could see the eagerness in her eyes, the calculating flicker that said, "Hurry up and die." During these visits, I used a technique I had mastered in my research days, listening while appearing to be absent. I was the silent observer, the ghost in the machine, and I learned things. The first crucial piece of information came from a casual, careless conversation between Charlotte and Ryan right outside the connecting door. They assumed the heavy wood blocked the sound. "Did you see the news about the market crash today?" Ryan's voice was tight with stress. "That SmartFlow stock is in the toilet. We lost another 50 grand. Charlotte hissed back. "Keep your voice down. We can't afford to lose any more. We need Mum's assets now. The $950,000 inheritance is the only thing keeping us afloat. The bank is asking about the collateral on the new wing." SmartFlow. That was the name of their new company. And the new wing they had just added to the mansion was already leveraged. I quickly typed a mental note. Financial distress, confirmed and linked directly to the mansion's structure. Their ambition was literally sinking their finances. The second, more terrifying piece of intelligence came the next morning. Ryan came in alone to bring me a bowl of broth, which I politely refused. He looked pale, almost panicked. "Mum, look, I need to know something," he asked, his voice low and urgent, devoid of the usual fake sympathy. "Is your will definitely set up to split everything between you and Charlotte?" "Yes, dear," I slurred, pretending confusion. "Everything goes to Charlotte. Always has been." He visibly relaxed, running a hand through his hair. "Good, because I had a horrible thought. You know how the new laws are. If, say, something happens, like an accidental death, does the insurance policy have any clauses about suspicious circumstances?" I forced a weak cough, letting the silence hang. "Accidental? Ryan, don't be silly, I'm just old. My policy is clean, honey. No one will suspect a thing." He nodded, relief flooding his face. Okay, that's good. Because the loan sharks called again. They gave me until the end of the week, $120,000 by Friday, or they break my legs. The end of the week. That accelerated the timeline. They were desperate. The subtle poisoning was now too slow. They would be moving to their Plan B, the quick, violent end I knew they had waiting. I had to act. Marcus was due in 48 hours, but I couldn't wait. I needed to move the physical evidence out of the house. I looked at the AI module, my only friend in this nightmare. "System, I need you to create a diversion, a major, house-wide system alert, something that will force them to leave the mansion for exactly 5 minutes and not look back." "Diverting a modern smart system is highly risky, Sylvie. It could compromise my operational status. I know the risk," I replied, my voice suddenly strong and clear, dropping the sick old woman facade. "But my risk is higher. Make it look like a critical power failure in the back wing. A meltdown. Something they have to fix immediately." The AI paused for a full second. Then, a low, mechanical whir. Affirmative. 5-minute window created. Executing in 60 seconds. Prepare for immediate egress. The countdown the AI provided felt like the final seconds before a rocket launch. 45 seconds. I was outside the garage, peering around the corner, waiting for the signal. The air was frigid, biting at my exposed skin, but I barely noticed. My focus was absolute. 10 seconds, the AI whispered in my ear. The plan was simple. Get the evidence into the mailbox at the end of the driveway, the pre-arranged drop zone for Marcus's contact. Then, get back inside the garage and look as close to death as possible. 5. Then the world changed. The lights in the smart mansion, which had been a low, serene amber, suddenly flared an alarming red. A piercing electronic klaxon blared from the roofline, not the gentle chime of a smoke alarm, but the deafening, urgent wail of a critical system failure. Critical failure. Power grid overload. Immediate shutdown required. The alarm was so loud it felt physical, a brutal impact to the senses. I saw movement immediately. The front door of the mansion burst open, and Ryan ran out, followed closely by Charlotte. They were both in sweatpants and t-shirts, their faces pale and panicked. "What the hell is that?" Charlotte screamed, clutching her head. "It's the power relay. It's showing a red fault in the main server hub," Ryan yelled back, already sprinting toward the side of the house where the utility boxes were located. "If that thing goes, we lose the entire grid, including the collateral software." Collateral software. That was the real panic. Not the house, but the digital assets connected to their crumbling business, SmartFlow. My AI had targeted their deepest vulnerability. Charlotte ran after him, her frantic voice echoing across the driveway. "Go, go! I'll check on Mom!" My heart seized. She was coming for me. My window was closing instantly. "System, divert her," I commanded in a rapid whisper. "Activating environmental sensor distraction," the AI replied. Just as Charlotte reached the garage door, a high-pitched, localized shriek erupted from the back corner of the yard. It sounded exactly like a motion-activated security camera being violently ripped from the wall. "A breach! The perimeter is down!" Ryan's voice boomed from the side of the house. Charlotte hesitated, torn between checking on their dying mother and securing their perimeter. The loss of a security camera would be far more damning to their sophisticated image than a forgetful mother. "Check the cameras," she screamed to Ryan, abandoning the garage door and sprinting toward the security hub near the main entrance. That was my window. I burst out of the garage, moving faster than I had in months, my legs fueled by sheer, visceral survival instinct. I ran low, sticking to the shadow of the hedges lining the driveway. I clutched the small, flat plastic container holding the camera and the vial. I reached the mailbox at the end of the long driveway. It was a sturdy, dark green metal box, exactly as arranged. I quickly popped it open, slid the container inside, and snapped it shut. The evidence was secured. Marcus's contact would collect it at dawn. I turned to run back, but as I did, I glanced back at the mansion. Charlotte and Ryan were huddled near the power box, bathed in the frantic, flashing red light of the alarm system. They were frantically punching commands into a handheld terminal, their faces contorted with stress and rage. I had been gone for exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I sprinted back, heart pounding, adrenaline wearing off to a sickening exhaustion. I fumbled the lock on the garage door, my fingers clumsy with fatigue. I slipped back inside and slammed the door shut, locking it just as the electronic klaxon suddenly cut off. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive, broken only by the soft thunk of the ventilation system restarting. The toxic air immediately rushed back in. I collapsed onto the cot, coughing uncontrollably. Seconds later, Charlotte was at the door, testing the lock. This time, she didn't bother with the fake sympathy. "Mum, are you okay?" Her voice was sharp, impatient, tinged with suspicion. "What was all that noise?" I fought to steady my breath. My throat was raw. "Oh dear, I think I heard a loud siren. A crash, maybe. I don't know, honey. My head is pounding." She didn't open the door. She didn't have to. She was confirming my location and my supposed confusion. "It was just a power glitch, Mum. Go back to sleep." I heard her footsteps quickly retreating. She was racing back to the financial disaster that was consuming her life. I lay there, breathing the poison, but feeling an electric current of triumph running through my veins. The emotional exhaustion was immense, but I had done it. I had gathered the proof and executed the first phase of my revenge. The physical sample and the digital evidence were safely on their way to Marcus. I was sick, yes, but I was also operating with the clarity and precision of a machine. My mind was sharp, cold, and utterly unforgiving. I was no longer just the victim in the cold garage. I was the architect of their downfall. I had moved the pieces. Now I just had to wait for Marcus to move his. The air in the cold garage was thick with anticipation. Marcus had arrived. I hadn't seen him, but I knew his methods. He worked in silence and shadow. My flip phone buzzed with another coded text. "Package secured. Analysis complete. Compound is a synthetic neurotoxin. Effects mimic rapid onset ALS or severe MS. Timeline confirmed. Initiate phase 3. Deception and defamation." Defamation. That was the first step of my revenge. It was time to use their own system against them. I waited until early evening, the time Charlotte and Ryan usually retreated to their smart wing for their evening meeting, likely to discuss their disastrous finances and my impending death. The air was cool, the silence profound. "System," I whispered to the AI module, "connect me to Marcus." The AI didn't speak. Instead, a tiny, almost invisible microphone light blinked on. A calm, familiar voice filled the air in the garage, a voice that carried the authority of a Harvard lab and a boardroom. "Sylvie, the sample confirms everything. They were aiming for full organ failure within 8 weeks. You are a biological miracle to have lasted this long." "I had a good base layer," I replied, the joke tasting like ash. "Listen, I need to execute a plan immediately. They are panicking. Ryan's debt collectors are closing in. They'll shift to plan B, something fast and violent." "Understood," Marcus confirmed. "My team is initiating a financial probe. We are tracking their $950,000 inheritance scheme. But first, we need to destabilize their mental control over you. This is where your performance as the failing old woman becomes a weapon." I had been waiting for this. "Tell me what to do." "You are going to give them a confession. Not a real one, but one that plants a specific toxic idea in their minds. You need to frame your recent forgetfulness not as a symptom of illness, but as a symptom of a major financial crime you supposedly committed years ago." It was a brilliant, terrifying concept. It turned me from the victim into a liability, a threat to their entire inheritance. I put the plan into action immediately. I put on the sickest clothes I owned and shuffled to the main house kitchen, using my multi-tool to disable the gentle chime on the door. I had to look like I'd escaped the garage unnoticed. Charlotte and Ryan were in the living room, deep in a tense conversation, their voices low and sharp. They were too preoccupied with their own impending doom to notice me at first. I stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, making sure I looked utterly lost and disoriented. "Ryan, you have to talk to the loan sharks." I can't lose the collateral, Charlotte pleaded, tears of frustration, not remorse, streaming down her face. Our entire company, SmartFlow, is tied up in the house. We need Mum's assets now. I let out a low, shaky moan. The documents, I whispered, loud enough to cut through their argument. Where are the documents? They both spun around, eyes wide with alarm. Their immediate focus shifted from their debt to me. Mum, what are you doing up? You need to go back to the garage. Charlotte rushed towards me, her face a mask of sudden fear. I pulled away from her touch, my voice cracking perfectly. I need the documents, the offshore account, before they find out. Ryan froze. His eyes narrowed, suspicion battling with panic. Offshore account. What are you talking about, Sylvie? I gripped the back of a chair, my body visibly trembling. I forced my eyes to dart nervously around the room, confirming my persona as a mentally declining criminal. The trust fund. The money from your father's patent sale. I never reported it all. It's in the Caymans. They'll send me to jail. You'll lose everything. The effect was instantaneous and profound. It was a massive psychological impact. Their financial desperation trumped their desire for my death. If I had committed a major financial crime, my assets would be frozen, seized, or disappear entirely before they could inherit a penny. Their entire motive, the $950,000 jackpot, was now under threat. Charlotte's face went from concern to cold, hard rage. What did you do, Mum? What money are you talking about? It's not safe, I cried out, my voice reaching a perfect hysterical pitch. I need to hide it. The feds will take everything. You have to help me, Ryan. You're good with systems. You have to move the money. I knew that the most important thing to them wasn't my health, but the money. I had successfully turned myself into a problem that they couldn't simply let die. They had to keep me alive and lucid enough to give them the access codes to the non-existent offshore account. Ryan looked at Charlotte, his mind clearly working through the logistics. He was calculating the risk of my mental breakdown versus the risk of losing their fortune. Okay, Mum. Calm down, Ryan said, his voice now dangerously smooth. He took my arm, his grip hard and physically dominant. We'll help you, but you need to tell us exactly where the codes are. We have to secure the assets first. It's the only way to save the inheritance. I had them. I had created a new, more complex layer of the game. I had activated Twist, refined and unexpected. My life was no longer about survival, but about their enslavement to my deception. I was the puppet master, and the strings were made of their own greed. The tension in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Ryan, his eyes now glittering with avarice, had me by the arm, his grip a painful reminder of his true nature. Charlotte stood across the room, watching us with a chilling blend of suspicion and rapacious curiosity. The codes, Mum, Ryan pressed, shaking my arm slightly. Tell us where the codes for the Cayman account are. We need to move the money before the feds, or, worse, the loan sharks realize what's happening. I let my body slump against him, forcing him to bear my weight. This was the moment I had to anchor the next layer of my deception. I wasn't just sick. I was complicit in a massive financial cover-up. The twist. Financial Criminal was now fully activated, turning their inherited goldmine into a potential liability they had to manage. The key, I stammered, my voice weak and trailing off. In the strongbox, under the floorboards. Charlotte immediately stepped forward, her focus sharp as a razor. What strongbox? We checked the old blueprints. There's no strongbox. In the garage, dear, I whispered, injecting just enough confusion into my tone to sound believable. Under the loose board, you know, where the old gardening tools used to be. Ryan released my arm and exchanged a look with Charlotte that was pure, unadulterated greed. They didn't care about my health, my safety, or my survival. They only cared about that offshore account, the millions of dollars I had just conjured out of thin air to save my own life. "Stay here, Mum," Ryan ordered, his voice suddenly sharp and authoritative. He didn't ask. He commanded. He grabbed a crowbar from the utility closet and sprinted out the front door toward the garage. Charlotte stayed behind, her eyes boring into mine, trying to find the lie. I could feel her intelligence working, testing the seams of my story. She was the more dangerous of the two. "Sylvie," she said, reverting to my first name, the last vestige of filial respect gone. "How much is in this account? Be honest. Is it enough to save SmartFlow?" I forced my eyes to tear up, not from sadness, but from a calculated fear. "It's enough. It's more than enough. But you have to be careful. If anyone finds out about the patent sale, it's all gone. All of it." The word patent was the trigger. Charlotte had always idolized the brilliant, elusive patent that my late husband had developed. The money from that sale had always been a mystery, a rumored fortune that fueled her imagination. Now, I had given it a location and a sense of urgency. Suddenly, a massive metallic crack echoed from the garage. Ryan was using the crowbar to pry up the floorboards. Charlotte tensed, then rushed to the front window to watch. "He better not damage anything important," she muttered, the professional architect emerging for a moment before the panicked criminal took over. I used her distraction. My hand slid into my sleeve and gripped the tiny concealed transmitter Marcus had slipped to me. I had to plant the device now. Marcus's instructions were clear. The transmitter needed to be near the mansion's main server hub to hijack the core logic board. "I feel faint, dear," I slurred, stumbling away from the chair. "I need to lie down." I didn't head for the garage. Instead, I shuffled down the hall toward the smart wing, the only part of the house dedicated to their high-tech operation. Charlotte, consumed by her anxiety over Ryan finding the non-existent strongbox, barely glanced at me. I reached the server room door. It was locked, of course, but I didn't need to enter. Ryan and Charlotte had installed a maintenance panel outside the door, a concession to their engineering hubris. I knelt clumsily, feigning weakness, pretending to struggle to catch my breath. I fumbled with the panel. It was secured with a basic magnetic lock. Using the magnet on the back of my antique phone, I disabled it in seconds. The panel popped open, revealing a tightly packed cluster of wiring and flashing indicator lights. This was the brain of their smart mansion. With trembling hands, I retrieved the tiny, coin-sized transmitter from my sleeve. It was sticky on one side. I pressed it firmly onto the largest fiber optic bundle, the mansion's main data conduit. "System activated," Marcus's voice hissed softly through my AI earpiece, a subtle, almost imperceptible sound. "I have established a ghost connection. Welcome to the machine, Sylvie." I quickly snapped the panel shut and shuffled back toward the living room, just as Ryan burst through the front door, his face red with effort and frustration. He was empty-handed. "There's nothing there, just a rusty old tin with old photographs." Charlotte rushed up to him. "What? Ryan, you fool. You must have missed it. Did you open the tin?" "It was just pictures, Charlotte. Pictures of Mum and Dad from before I was born. I wasted 5 minutes tearing up the floor for nothing." I stood in the doorway, a look of pure, bewildered confusion on my face. "Tin? What tin, dear? I don't remember any tin." Ryan stared at me, his eyes blazing with fury. His entire world was collapsing. Loan sharks, a failed business, and now a mother whose sudden mental decline threatened to make their hard-won inheritance worthless. He roared, his voice cracking with a terrifying mix of desperation and rage. He took 2 steps toward me, his hands clenching into fists, the look in his eyes pure murder. This was the moment of physical threat, the raw eruption of his predatory instinct. "You're lying, Sylvie. You're trying to hide the money. Where is the key? Tell me where the damn key is, or I swear to God I'll—" It was the perfect moment. I had pushed them to the brink. I had to break the illusion now, before he touched me. I straightened my spine, letting the feigned weakness fall away. My eyes, which had been confused and teary moments ago, hardened into the cold, analytical stare of the scientist he knew, the same stare that had terrified him when he broke rules as a child. "It's over, Ryan," I said, my voice low, clear, and steady. The change in my voice was itself an impact, the return of the matriarch. "I know everything," Charlotte gasped, recoiling from the raw power in my voice. The game had just shifted from survival to confrontation. "It's over, Ryan," I repeated, my voice now a calm, terrifying contrast to his raging fury. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the sickly, frail mother. I was Sylvie the scientist, Sylvie the survivor, and Sylvie the judge. Ryan stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes, seconds ago filled with murderous intent, flickered with sudden, profound doubt. The shock of my clarity, my sudden return to full mental capacity, was a psychological bomb. He looked past me to Charlotte, appealing for confirmation that I was still the dying woman they had created. Charlotte, however, was staring at the doorway of the server room I had just passed. She was an engineer. She understood system logic. My sudden clarity, coupled with my suspicious movement, clicked into place for her faster than it did for Ryan. "Ryan, the basement," Charlotte whispered, her voice tight with panic. "And the ventilation. She knows." That was the key. They confirmed their knowledge, their guilt, and the system they had used. The time for pretense was over. "I know about the neurotoxin," I stated clearly, every word a hammer blow. "I know about the custom ducting Ryan installed during the renovation. I know about the automatic dispersal system you programmed, Charlotte. A slow, agonizing death meant to mimic ALS, timed perfectly to coincide with the final payment of your $950,000 life insurance policy." Ryan shook his head, denial a pathetic shield. "No, you're hallucinating. It's the illness. You're breaking down, Sylvie. You need a doctor." "A doctor to document the natural cause of death you fabricated," I countered, taking a slow, steady step toward them. "I already have the documentation, dear. I have the photos of your dispensing unit and a sample of your chemical compound, which is currently being analyzed by the most ruthless forensic chemist in the country." This was the core of the twist. Irrefutable evidence. I had not just survived their crime. I had scientifically disassembled it. Charlotte's denial was sharper, colder. "You're bluffing. You can't possibly have left the garage. The doors were locked, the cameras are running, and your AI is too primitive." "The AI you didn't know existed just helped me hijack the core logic board of your smart mansion, Charlotte," I replied, a cold smile touching my lips. "And as for the cameras, darling, let's have a look." I raised my voice, directing my words not at them, but at the empty air around us. "System, access the ghost feed. Display the live basement footage on the living room screen." Suddenly, the massive 80-inch television above the fireplace, which minutes ago had been displaying calming stock photos of their perfect life, snapped on. It displayed a live feed of their meticulously clean basement. Then, the picture shifted to a close-up, zooming in on the now empty space behind the main air handler. The camera I had hidden earlier provided the perfect, irrefutable angle. The screen showed two damning things simultaneously: an empty metal platform where the neurotoxin dispenser had been, and a tiny, almost invisible wire tap, Marcus's device, blinking innocuously on the main server cable. "The device is gone," Ryan muttered, his face draining of color. He was focused only on the missing equipment. "Yes, it is," I confirmed. "But what is this, Ryan?" The feed zoomed back out, showing a wide shot of the area. A small, shiny spot of oil remained on the concrete floor beneath where the dispenser had stood. The camera focused on it, and the AI overlaid a clean, white text box. "Trace residue confirmed, synthetic neurotoxin C12. This was the climax, immediate impact. Ryan, defeated, stumbled backward, crashing into a heavy oak console table. The violent physical impact made the entire room shudder, sending a priceless crystal vase tumbling to the floor where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was deafening, a mirror to the wreckage of their lives. "The money," Ryan choked out, not even looking at me, his eyes locked on the screen. "We needed the money. They were going to kill me, Charlotte. They were going to break my legs." Charlotte watched the scene unfold with terrifying stillness. Her eyes never left mine, but her lips curled into a snarl of pure hatred. She recognized the superiority of my countermove. She saw the scientific perfection of my revenge. "You should have just died, Mother," Charlotte hissed, her voice cutting through the ringing silence left by the broken vase. "It would have been easier for everyone." "It would have been profitable for everyone," I corrected her gently. "And that is where your fatal flaw lies. You valued money over the bond of blood. I valued truth over my own life. I had pushed them past the point of no return. Ryan was broken, but Charlotte was still capable of fighting. I knew what came next. "System, dial the Oregon State Police, non-emergency line," I commanded. "I have 2 individuals here who need to be processed for conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse. Address, 4839 Aspen Trail." As the phone began to dial, Charlotte lunged. She didn't go for me. She went for the server room, racing to rip the transmitter off the main board before the police call could be completed and the data secured. Ryan, however, collapsed onto the floor, his hands covering his face, his debt and his crime crushing him. His desperate, terrified plea was a moment of intense emotional breakdown. I'm sorry, Mum. The debts. The debt." He sobbed uncontrollably, the facade of the successful engineer gone, replaced by a terrified child. It was a momentary, flawed confession that only cemented their guilt. The sound of the phone ringing in the silent room was the final curtain. The police were about to arrive. Charlotte didn't hesitate. The raw desire to protect her carefully constructed empire was a powerful motivator. As the police call initiated, she shrieked and sprinted toward the server room. Ryan was still curled on the floor, weeping over his debt, his breakdown providing a chilling soundtrack to his wife's final, desperate act. "You won't ruin me, Mother," Charlotte screamed, reaching the maintenance panel. Her fingers, usually so precise on a keyboard, fumbled with the magnetic lock. She didn't have my practiced touch or my emergency magnet. She was panicking. "The police are connecting, Charlotte," I announced calmly, still standing in the center of the shattered living room, watching the scene unfold on the massive TV screen. "Any action you take now is on tape. Every word, every movement. The system is recording it all." "I don't care," she snarled, ripping the panel open. She saw the small, coin-sized transmitter clinging to the main data cable. She reached for it, her face twisted in a mask of pure, ugly malice. This was the climax of the revenge plot, the moment the predator realized the prey was armed and smarter. Just as her fingers touched the device, I spoke the final command to the ghost AI. "System, Execute shutdown sequence. Full power purge. The effect was instantaneous and comprehensive. Not just the lights, but the entire house, the fans, the screens, the refrigerator hum, died instantly. The smart mansion, Charlotte and Ryan's glorious monument to their success, went utterly dark and silent. It was a complete system collapse, a symbol of the utter failure of their meticulous plan. Charlotte let out a frustrated cry, pulling her hand back. Too late. The internal battery in my AI earpiece, however, kept Marcus connected. Data successfully secured, Sylvie. Full transmission confirmed. The ghost network is now dormant. You are safe. The police are 10 seconds out. Marcus's voice was low and steady, a grounding anchor in the darkness. I walked toward the kitchen, toward the glass front doors where the headlights of the arriving police vehicles were now flashing through the windows. Ryan was still sobbing on the floor. Charlotte was frozen by the server panel, defeated by her own technology. The first sound was the heavy thud of boots on the granite steps. 2 officers, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, stood in the doorway. "Police! Put your hands where we can see them," the lead officer barked, his flashlight aimed directly at Charlotte. Charlotte slowly raised her hands, still staring at the blank panel, her defeat absolute. "She's sick," Charlotte whispered, trying one last pathetic defense. "She's delusional. She attacked us." "The delusion is over, Charlotte," I said, stepping into the pool of light. I no longer looked frail or sick. I stood tall, my voice steady, the cold of the garage banished by the triumph of my will. "I am Sylvie. I called you. The 2 people on the floor are my daughter, Charlotte Davis, and my son-in-law, Ryan Davis. They are charged with attempted murder by chemical neurotoxin poisoning, conspiracy, and elder abuse." I pointed to the floor. "The man is confessing to financial crimes and debt threats right now, and the woman is standing next to the electronic panel that ran their murder system." The officers quickly secured Ryan, whose emotional breakdown had turned him into a pathetic, whimpering liability. As they cuffed Charlotte, she finally looked at me, her eyes burning with pure, distilled hatred. "You used your own life against us," she spat, her voice venomous. "I used your greed against you," I corrected her. "You thought the money was guaranteed. You didn't realize that $950,000 was never worth the value of the blood you shared. And this was the moment of intense emotional revelation for them, the realization that they had lost everything, their money, their future, and their freedom, because they underestimated the mother they planned to eliminate. The officers escorted them out, their cries and shouts fading into the quiet night. Before she disappeared into the darkness, Charlotte turned back one last time. "You were always the smarter one, Mother. Always." It was a twisted, final acknowledgement of my intellectual victory. I stood there alone in the dark, silent house. My body ached, my head pounded, and the poisonous air had done its damage. But my heart, though deeply wounded, was not broken. I had survived. The cold garage had saved me, and the intelligence I had passed down to my children had been the very tool of their destruction. The house, their perfect world, was now empty, cold and dark, just like the life they had planned for me. The police would take the evidence now. The criminal investigation was beginning, but for me, the fight for my survival was over. Now the battle for my soul, the final stage of healing, was about to start. The aftermath was a blur of fluorescent lights, official forms, and the endless, measured voice of Marcus Kane. For the next week, the smart mansion was declared a crime scene, sealed off with yellow tape, a stark contrast to its previous sterile perfection. I was taken to a local medical facility, not for my physical health, which was certainly compromised by the neurotoxin, but for the safety and the official documentation of my ordeal. Marcus was my shadow. He managed the police, the toxicology reports, and the swarm of questions. He was the anchor I desperately needed, transforming my frantic evidence into a watertight legal case. He even personally delivered the official toxicology report from the sample I'd collected, placing it on my sterile nightstand. "The compound is exotic, Sylvie," he informed me, his face grim. "A synthetic, slow-release derivative of ricin, almost untraceable without the specific chemical markers we provided. Charlotte's genius and Ryan's technical execution was almost perfect. Almost. The criminal case was solid. My Ghost AI provided audio confirmation of their planning and Ryan's subsequent breakdown, Charlotte's admissions, and the undeniable financial motive. The police recovered the dismantled dispersal unit hidden under a loose panel in the attic, their final, panicked hiding spot. The most damning piece of evidence, however, was found on Charlotte's encrypted SmartFlow company server, which Marcus's team had legally accessed. It was an Excel spreadsheet, a chilling document entitled Project Inheritance Timetable. It detailed the exact concentration curve of the neurotoxin, matching my physical symptoms over the past year, and included a projected date of final asset acquisition. This spreadsheet turned attempted murder into undeniable premeditated crime. The media coverage was immediate and sensational. Smart mansion betrayal and the poisoned matriarch ran across every news outlet. The image of the perfect, tech-savvy couple attempting to chemically liquidate the mother who funded them captivated the country. I refused to see Charlotte or Ryan. They sent letters, not of apology, but of denial and blame. Ryan pleaded financial duress. Charlotte accused me of elder abuse and psychological manipulation, claiming the entire AI story was a fabrication of a delusional mind. Their defense strategy, just as I had predicted, was to cast doubt on my sanity. But the spreadsheets and the neurotoxin sample spoke louder than any defense attorney. The final act of my revenge, the socialized revenge, played out in the courtroom during the pre-trial hearing. Marcus, acting as my special counsel, presented the financial evidence. He revealed that their company, SmartFlow, was not merely failing. It was a shell corporation built entirely on the collateral of my potential inheritance. He detailed Ryan's $120,000 debt to loan sharks and Charlotte's catastrophic financial mismanagement. The ultimate blow came when Marcus announced my decision regarding the estate. The insurance policy, the savings, and the value of the smart mansion, the entire $950,000 fortune they had killed for, was placed into a court-ordered trust. This trust was dedicated to one purpose: funding the legal defense and medical care of elder abuse victims across the state of Oregon. Mrs. Sylvie Davis, having survived the conspiracy of her children, has ensured that the object of their greed will now serve a greater purpose, Marcus stated to the press afterward. Not a penny of this fortune will ever touch the hands of those who conspired against her. It was a brilliant maneuver. The money was taken off the table completely, their motive was confirmed, and their prize was permanently dissolved. They had murdered their mother's trust and love for nothing. The act felt immense, an emotional tidal wave that washed away the last lingering toxins of their betrayal. This was the element of release, a profound, cleansing moment. I had not only survived their plan, but I had used the very spoils of their intended crime to fund a campaign against others like them. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. I received the news 2 months later. Charlotte Davis was convicted of attempted premeditated murder and conspiracy, sentenced to 22 years in a maximum security prison. Ryan Davis received an 18-year sentence for the same charges, with his earlier confession playing a minor role in the slight reduction. The betrayal was final. The justice was served. Now the empty space where my family used to be was ready to be filled, not with new people, but with a new purpose. The fight was over. The recovery was about to begin. The months following the trial were dedicated to recovery. Not just the physical recovery from the neurotoxin, which required constant monitoring and medication, but the emotional recovery from the betrayal. Marcus, my scientific ally, stayed on as my trustee and guardian, handling the sale of the Smart Mansion and the establishment of the Elder Abuse Foundation. I couldn't stay in Oregon. The cold was too real, the memories too sharp. I sold the mansion for a loss, eager to erase the symbol of their greed. With the remaining funds and my personal savings, I moved to a quiet, sun-drenched beach town in Southern California. The salt air and the rhythmic sound of the Pacific Ocean became my daily therapy. The final act of my healing wasn't the conviction, it was the restoration of my purpose. The Elder Abuse Foundation, built with the money they coveted, became my new life's work. It was a perfect, meaning-filled recovery. We used my expertise in chemical analysis to train legal teams and forensic specialists to detect chemical and digital elder abuse, the exact crimes Charlotte and Ryan committed. I was taking the pain of my past and turning it into a shield for others. One afternoon, 6 months after the sentencing, Marcus handed me a heavily redacted letter. It was from Ryan. "I didn't want this," he wrote, his handwriting shaky. "I was terrified of the loan sharks. I let my fear of debt override everything. I see the foundation you built. It's a better use of the money. I hope you can find peace, Mom. I know I won't." It wasn't a full apology, but it was an acknowledgement of guilt that went beyond the courtroom theatrics. It was the sound of a heart beginning to break down its own walls of denial. I realized that my goal was never just about seeing them punished. It was about forcing them to see the truth. I did not reply to Ryan, but the sight of his broken spirit allowed me a sliver of forgiveness. Not a release from their punishment, but a release for me from the consuming bitterness. I forgave the child he used to be, the child who had been lost to crippling greed. A year later, Charlotte wrote. Her letter was shorter, colder, yet contained a devastating finality. "I know I can't be forgiven," she wrote. "I saw the spreadsheets. I did the math. The math was wrong. I was wrong about you, Mother, and I was wrong about everything else." Her words confirmed the complete defeat of her logic. Her perfect crime, built on flawless calculation, was undone by the simple, enduring force of a mother's will. She, the scientist, had finally accepted the superior data. I wrote back to Charlotte. Not a long letter, and not about the crime. I wrote about the day she won her first science fair with a model of a self-sustaining ecosystem. "Your mind was always your greatest gift, Charlotte," I wrote. "I hope you use your time to rebuild the foundation of that mind. That is the only thing truly worth saving." I had learned that justice is served by the state, but forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I had secured the justice, now I secured the peace. The trauma would always be a scar, but it was a scar that proved I had survived. Marcus stayed on as my dear friend. He became the family I needed, loyal, brilliant, and honest. We spend weekends by the ocean, planning the foundation's next move. I found solace in purpose, and I found love in the most unexpected of alliances. The cold garage was gone, replaced by the warm, constant presence of the ocean. Life teaches us that the deepest betrayals come from within, but the strongest redemption comes from within as well. I lost my family, but I reclaimed my life, my fortune, and my soul. I stand today not as a victim, but as the architect of my own resilient future. And that's the end of my story. It's hard to believe a failing smart home system actually saved my life. My question for you today is this. What is the most important lesson you've learned about trust? And who in your life, a stranger or a friend, has truly proven they are family? Let me know in the comments below.